It is 2 minutes after 6. We are in the Nashua High North Boardroom. Is February 5th. This is the Finance and Operations Committee. Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
Mr. Mosier?
I'm here.
And you're by yourself and you can hear okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I'm Mrs. Oden. Other attendees are Mr. Donovan, Mr. Smith, Ms. Gingras, and we have a guest presentation. So I'm going to, and the president of the board just walked in, Ms. Raymond. Okay, so I'll turn the meeting over to you at this point, Mr. Donovan.
Okay, so I will introduce, if you recall, we hired an energy contracting company about 6 months ago. Am I right? And that company is here tonight. It's called EEI, and Mike Davey will be giving us a presentation. He has done a review of a couple of the schools, and he's going to run through the review. So I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Mike Davey with EEI, and I have with me Steve Marshall with EEI and Chris Clordy with Control Technologies. And Control Technologies currently performs most of the HVAC controls, thermostat programming throughout the school district. And after the RFQ process to select a performance contractor was completed, we started working with the school district, Gary and Sean specifically from the facilities department, to try and analyze the opportunities for energy savings. And just from a big picture, what an energy performance contract does is it allows the district to leverage the energy savings from improvements and combine that with capital needs improvements in the district to create a project which is usually budget neutral. So the way it's typically structured is that the annual energy savings from our project would be paid for, would pay for the financing of the project. So for example, if the financing charges were roughly $100,000, we would need $100,000 in energy savings to keep it budget neutral. So that's what's very attractive about performance contracting is you can leverage the energy savings that is a result of the project to get needed improvements throughout your building. And so we were tasked with this by this committee to start with a preliminary study of the high schools. The reason being is those are your two largest energy users. And by a wide range. So that's what we started with, and I have a high-level presentation about that. We have a spreadsheet which has been previously distributed to this board at a previous meeting, which indicates the recommended improvements at Nashua North and Nashua South High School. And if all of the improvements that we came up with were implemented, it could be financed in a way that is tax and budget neutral. So the way that would, again, work is that typically the annual energy savings that we've come up with is guaranteed, and then that money would be reduced from your energy budget typically, and then there'd be a finance charge of an equal amount. That's typically the way that works. I'll go through the spreadsheet in more detail later, but from a big picture, we identified $3.6 million worth of work at North and $3.8 million worth of work at South, which would reduce your annual energy savings by $224,000 a year. And you would be eligible for $400,000 in grants and rebates toward that work. So the simple payback, which is the energy the cost minus the rebates and grants divided by the savings is 14.6 years. So if a project like this were financed with a 20-year bond, the annual, or lease, the annual energy savings would be equal to the annual bond or lease payment, or that's how we would propose the project could be structured. As you're aware, these schools are very large, north and south, and it's my understanding that they rotate the usage in the summer, so that it's typical that one school will have a much higher usage during the summer, and that's to kind of create equal air conditioning loads, so that you're not running the air conditioning at both schools all summer, or you're not always running all the summer programs at South. So the most natural way to do this would be to do the bulk of the work over a summer period, and to start the first summer with the high school, where the summer programs won't be housed, and then the following summer to follow that same rotation. The opportunities for energy savings are substantial. So if you look at just the two high schools, we're over $500,000 a year in energy savings. And there's an opportunity to group the projects such as lighting that have a relatively quick payback with some necessary infrastructure upgrades, such as the building automation system and the hot water heaters, both of which ASHRAE, which is the governing body for the HVAC industry, will tell you have an estimated life of 15 to 20 years. So both the hot water system and the building automation system have components, not the entire system, meaning that are coming near the recommended end of useful life. We also looked at solar, and one of the things that we found is Nashua North and South are great candidates for solar. However, the life expectancy of a commercial roof that's well maintained is about 25 years, and which would mean that the useful life of the roofs on these schools is at least 7 more years, and the useful life of solar panels is 20 to 25 years. So at this time, and in speaking with Sean and Gary, these roofs have not been problematic. So for example, if we had heard, hey, these roofs leak all the time, maybe it would be worth considering replacing a roof and installing a solar system. But it appears that based on the best of our knowledge, there's still useful life in this system, and the cost of installing a solar system and then taking it off again when you replace the roof is not cost effective. So what we recommend is to match solar with new roofs. So the newest roofs that we're aware of are Dr. Crisp, and Fairgrounds has. I don't know if that roof is completed or that's the pending project completed. So those are the two newest roofs. So on the third page, we gave a rough allowance, which basically shows that a fairly substantial solar project could fit into the payback period of this project. So if the board wanted to include solar at this time, we wouldn't recommend it at the high schools. We would probably look for alternate locations. And these numbers, I will say, are preliminary. We have not done due diligence on structural loading yet. These are preliminary numbers as to what the savings and costs would look like. And they also do not show a state grant. So the state of New Hampshire is expected to have grant money that could go toward this project, but it was so preliminary that we haven't applied for that yet. So we've left that off, but that can be up to another $35,000 that could come off if solar was was a desire of the board. And so at the end of today, what we are seeking approval from this board is to continue with turning these preliminary numbers into final numbers. So right now, I know that we just have a spreadsheet, which is just cost and savings. When we get a final scope, it would include quantities, the guaranteed savings amount, which will be it'll all be very similar to this. And these numbers are good enough that they could be put into a budget, but we're not ready for contract yet. And so if you were to say EEI, it really makes sense to do north in the summer of 2020. I remember when 2020 used to seem like far away, but it's not anymore. Or even as soon as 2019. Then what we would need approval from this board is to start meeting with Dan in figuring out, possibly in conjunction with the city, the best way to finance this. And I have a separate presentation about financing after this. And also to complete the investment grade audit, which will have the quantities. We'll do more metering to firm up the savings, but this is a broad guideline of what we expect to find. So it wouldn't be likely that the results would be much different from this in terms of cost and savings, but there'd be a lot more detail to be filled in. Yep.
Just want to interject that in the capital improvement package we submitted this year, both of these projects are in it for funding. And of course, that process has just started, so we don't know where they'll end up with the city. But the city, as far as the city is aware of at this point, that request is for 3.7 million per school. Doesn't really talk to the fact that it's budget neutral, which is really huge. I mean, we haven't. So when we sit down with the city treasurer or whatever, Dan, then that's a point we'll have to make. So that's all very key for us. We've already kind of started the ball rolling in this direction. But a question for you, Mike. I'm sorry for hitting you with this when I couldn't have, when I was sitting across the table from you earlier. But so the condensing hot water, that's the domestic hot water.
Yes.
For the sinks and everything.
Yes.
Does it make any sense at all to use solar power just for that piece? Say we have a really good roof that we're really...
It's something we could look at that and give you that option, but again, the roof is the issue that has steered us away from solar at this point. It's something that again, that's the only reason we haven't really considered solar at this point, is the roof time periods don't line up. Okay. The LED lighting is a key component to doing energy projects, mainly because the technology is so strong that it has a good payback. And when we come up with the savings, we're saying the lighting alone would save $130,000 per school, and that's just in electric savings. So what is not included is that there is usually significant maintenance savings, because the average life expectancy of a fluorescent light bulb, which there are, I don't know, 5,000 plus light bulbs in this building alone, is 7 years. So that means you've already gone through, on average, 2 life cycles since the buildings have been built. And the average lifespan of a ballast, which is the electronic component inside the fixture, is, what do we think? 32,000 hours. So that's a run hour. So those are all either at end of life or coming near it. So that means that it's likely that it's a hard number to quantify, but it's likely that a lot of light bulbs and ballasts are being purchased at each school and being replaced on an annual basis. The expected life of a LED fixture in a classroom environment is 18 years. So it has substantial life expectancy. All the products have a long warranty, and the energy savings is substantial. And what we not only do you get better light and less maintenance, but these fixtures are all dimmable, meaning the teacher can set the light at the desired output. It's not just an on-off scenario. And they also have daylight sensors. So if you have fixtures near a window, they'll auto dim based on the sunlight. And
Occupancy sensors too?
yeah, that's all built into the fixture. Occupancy sensors, daylight sensors. Yep.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to wait, but did you say 130,000 per year?
Yes.
So that column on the spreadsheet is the savings per year?
Yes.
Oh, wow, okay.
Per school.
Okay, thank you.
These are big numbers, and these are big schools. Yep.
It's been a while since I've been on finance, but I do remember the board passed, we're buying solar, out in the market. We contracted with someone we're buying some of their solar output toward our electricity purchases, if I remember correctly. So the school has already made a commitment, district has made a commitment to solar. Is that right?
Well, we've purchased into a solar farm, which it's much different from that we're proposing here. It just indicates that
I'm just trying to make the point for the public. We have invested in solar. We're green. We're buying our energy, or with future contracts once the thing is built. We are energy thinking solar and have implemented programs. It's not like we've blown it off or ignored it. I appreciate your candor.
Yep.
And quite frankly, I'll just say your honesty about the impact of solar on a roof and life cycle of the roof and when you might want to do it. I thank you very much for being reality-based in your comment. I really want to thank you for that. And thank you, Ms. Raymond, because I had the same question about, was this a per year savings? That wasn't clear by your chart.
Sure.
And are you going to walk down each of these?
I can.
Or can I ask you a question
Sure.
on the next item?
Absolutely.
I mean, I have no reservations about things that are short-term.
Yep.
I really wonder and would appreciate an explanation about, 77-year paybacks or 50 years or.
Yep. So the idea is so specifically the hot water heaters and the controls have longer paybacks than the lighting and the transformers. And I actually have an item on here which is called balancing, which has 0 payback and is 75,000. So let me just talk about why am I packaging something that has, I'm going to start with balancing. Balancing is a process where you measure airflow at different registers and diffusers. So for example, right above your head, there are registers and diffusers, which have a designed airflow coming out of them. As we were looking at the control systems, and the building was most likely balanced when it was built. However, things happen over 20 years, and people go in and close dampers off, insulation falls and blocks ductwork. And so we found there are several portions of the school which have the valve is fully open, meaning it's trying to make the water as hot as it is as the air pushes across it. And so the valve is wide open, and it's been wide open 8 hours a day, but yet the room temperature has not increased. And so one of our, it's impossible during the audit process to hit every single valve and every single thermostat. So our assumption is there are some zones that are not getting enough airflow. And that's usually because the airflow is going somewhere else. So for example, the neighboring classroom is get double what they need, and then this one isn't getting enough. So we haven't proposed rebalancing the entire building, but we've proposed doing a targeted balancing, which is where we'll create a list of all the zones from a process called analytics. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but analytics is a process where we are monitoring at almost all the Nashua schools, all the temperatures and all the set points electronically, and we get a report every month which lists zones that aren't coming up to temperature, or zones that are overheating, or zones that run all night. And so we want to create a list of those and go eventually throughout the district and fix all those areas. So we've collected a ton of data, and so balancing would solve that. If we don't do the balancing, which has no quote unquote savings, it's hard for us to optimize the efficiency of the heating system. So that with the controls, each classroom throughout the building has what's called a VAV, which stands for variable air volume. And so the way, typically in your house, if you either have a furnace or a hot water heater. So if you have a furnace, it's ducted system, and it's just putting out one temperature, air, or you have baseboard hot water around the zone, and there's a zone pump in your basement that brings hot water up when it gets cold. In a school, there's one air handler that may be doing 20 classrooms. So you can't just put out one temperature like in a house. And it's a big ducted unit. And then each classroom has a box above the ceiling that will change the amount of airflow and the amount of heat. It has a valve and a damper to regulate the heat and the flow through the coil. And that's how each classroom gets individual heating. The controls that monitor VAV heating, the estimated life of those units is 15 to 20 years. And so some of those control units have failed, and I know that we could get the numbers, but I know, speaking with Gary, that he's replacing several a year right now. And so that's fine. You can just continue down that path of doing several a year. The downside of that is the technology of the new units is much more efficient. And if you do it with a wholesale replacement, you can put in top of the line equipment with demand-based ventilation, so we know how many people are in this room, and in addition to regulating the temperature, we only bring in enough air for the people in the space. And there's substantial energy savings, and you get the newest technology. If you replace them as they break, you kind of are forced to put back what's there now. And so that's the reason that we don't advise, that's the benefit of packaging the strong payback items with the long necessary improvements that the district is going to make one way or another, whether it's 20 a year or whether it's all how many hundred at once? 300 at once. Yeah.
Excuse me, we have a member on the phone, and I'd like to just ask him if he has a question at this point. Mr. Mosier, do you have a question for the gentleman at this point?
Oh, I've been very carefully listening to this, and as a member of the engineering on heating and air conditioning, I have some questions. On these units that you have, especially for the lighting, number one, they are completely ballast-free, or do they have another circuit in there to limit the current should the LEDs fail?
They are ballast-free. There are ballasts are not included in most LED lights anymore. They come with drivers, which are about the same shape and color as a ballast, but they work with LED components.
Okay, very good. On the air handlers, I know very much how both in air handling and controlling the water flow through the heating apparatus, that if you don't consider failing some of these parts, you're just blowing smoke, because they do fail, and some of them fail more often than others. One of the things I am interested in is when you have the air coming through from the air handler, and you got the ducts and the valve that, or the control that controls the airflow into the classroom, can these be balanced so that the temperature of the air coming into that control is the same, so that you're getting a kind of a recycling of the interior air into the duct as well as getting the warm or warmed air into the room. Looking at a kind of a modulating control on the ductwork going into the classroom. We have something like that we can modulate the air and getting maybe some fresh air into the rooms, along with the air coming from the heated air coming from the air handler.
This is Chris Clarity from Control Technologies. I'm going to do what I can to try to answer that. So typically with a VAV system, which this is, the main air handler will put out 55 degrees so that any VAV below it that wants cooling can cool. And then every VAV then reheats up to the desired temperature. So every zone can put out to the space what it needs for the individual load in that room. The air at the air handler is recirculated. It's not 100% outdoor air. And I think one thing you maybe were asking was, can this air that goes to all the boxes be changed to help meet the load of all of the rooms as a whole? And they can, but the issue does come up that once one or two rooms needs cooling, they all tend to get a cooler air.
That's right, because the more people in the room, the more BTUs being put out, and therefore, whether you're cooling, then you need more cooling. But if you have less people, then you don't need so much cooling, and you just want to maintain an equal temperature across the heating device, so that you're not having the thing run cool on you when more heating is required.
Absolutely, and the thing to do is usually if you have one zone that's causing the whole system to go into a cooling mode or to be has a different load than all of its peers, you pull that one system off and give it its own dedicated system so that everyone else can run as one big happy family. Yeah,
and I understand that designing this kind of thing for something as large as our high schools takes quite a bit of calculation and getting the numbers right so that the heating and cooling load on the air handler is more or less equal.
Good.
Okay. Are you finished, Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Thanks. When you were speaking about the lights, you said they were also dimmable.
Yes.
Does the cost of installation include dimmable switches?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And one of the things, the numbers that we're talking about are so big, and we're talking about multiple schools. So one of the things I did is I brought a graph of a project we just completed this summer. This is Virgins Union High School in Vermont, which to give you an order of magnitude, this would be similar to like a Merrimack High School in size in terms of square footage. Since we implemented the project over the summer of 2018, their electricity has dropped 46%, and that is just on electric savings at this school. It's $72,000 per year. Again, at a school about the size of Merrimack High School, and you can see it's as we're continuing to commission it and work with the controls, the usage is actually going down as it's getting colder. So we got the project mostly started in July, August, and then September, but the usage is actually continuing to decline as we use this process called analytics to monitor all the points all the time, and then give the building operators feedback to say, this room didn't heat up in time, this room's too hot, this valve. So this is an example of the amount of savings that would be realized if this project, in terms of an order of magnitude. Electrical transformers are something that you don't really think about, but what they are, there's 32 of them at north and there's 30 at south. They're hidden away in janitors' closets and boiler rooms and such. And what we found is that we came out and we metered all the transformers at south and north, and we found that on average, the transformers are loaded at 5.5%. So the way that the transformers that are in this building are designed is their peak efficiency is 30% loaded. So on average, you're only seeing a 5% load. So if you have, the transformers we're looking at are 75 kVA, and you only have about 5% of that load going through it. Why is that? Engineers and the electrical code are conservative, so they don't ever want a transformer that's undersized and overheating and potentially even a fire. So you don't, I understand why they do it, but again, they're designed for their peak efficiency at 35%. So if you were to swap the transformers out with transformers that are designed to have peak efficiency at 8 or 9%, which closely matches your load, the annual savings per high school would be 400,000 kilowatt hours. And to put that number in perspective, that is more than the entire electric consumption for Birch Hill Elementary. So by just implementing this transformer replacement, it would be the equivalent of reducing the entire electric output of an elementary school. Yep.
You can't do something like, my electricity knowledge is pretty minimal.
Yeah.
But you can't increase the load through those transformers to get them up to the 30%.
Only by introducing your power consumption. So,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, you can't like redirect a couple of them
No.
together is what I was thinking.
No, unfortunately not.
Do we still need the number, even if you up or downgrade is sort of maybe what it is?
We would look at ways to possibly reduce the number. So for example, what you're looking at is, this is a picture. The green ones are the new energy efficiency ones, so that's how you know they're green. And that's a picture from Manchester West High School. And what we were able to do is sometimes consolidate. So if there was 3 in a room, you could get 2. There's a little more upfront cost, but then longer term energy savings when you do it that way. So that would be one of the things we'd bring an electrical engineer on. If the board said, hey, we want to look at north or south, and we would bring an electrical engineer on to dive into that a little further. But that is a possibility. This is a picture of a gym, and to give you the size of these buildings are really much higher than we're used to seeing. They're just really big schools, which is great, and that means the chance for energy savings is high. So that there's units that have 30,000 CFM, and what that means is they're moving a huge amount of air. So to give you an example, a bathroom fan in your house is probably 50 CFM. So these units are moving 30,000 CFM, and they can be, what we're finding is they're always running with at least 15% minimum outside air, but the code allows you to, so that means you're bringing in outside air, heating it up, and then exhausting it out to school. But the code allows you to control based on demand control. So we'd put a CO2 sensor in each classroom, and then you could just bring in enough air to meet the actual people needs in the space, as opposed to bringing in outside air per the peak design. So there's a huge opportunity for savings with demand control. So that's a little bit at a high level. As to next steps, we have to turn this preliminary spreadsheet into what we call an investment grade audit. And so the difference is the numbers, you're seeing some kind of round numbers in the energy savings. We would put in sensors and really fine tune the energy savings. However, the order of magnitude, we expect to be very close to these numbers because we're conservative with that. And also fine tune the price. So the next step is to get approval from this board to move into the investment grade phase, and then the contract documents, and then at that point we would also want to get approval to move forward with looking with the business administrator at financing options. There are many ways to finance projects like this. The most common way for cities is probably to do a bond. However, there are also lease options, which may or may not be attractive to the city, depending on rates and depending on overall bonding capacity. And then once we do the investment grade audit, we would most likely need to sit with Sean and Gary and Dan at a minimum and just go detail by detail through the scope to make sure there's 100% agreement on that path. And I have, so that's a quick summary of where we're at. I also have, and I want to defer to Dan if this is the right time, we have a PowerPoint about different ways to finance these projects and how different cities have done it, but I don't know if this is the right time for that or not.
Well, it's up to the board. I mean, if they want to hear it, I think we've sort of heard the first part here. I think that could be, because I think then we need to move this on to the full board, and hopefully you could come back at the full board meeting. But then I think that would probably be the next, I think the finance discussion, we could either have that night or have it at another finance and
At the
ops.
finance meeting, probably.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Yep.
I think you said, and I think we know, the roof on this school is probably about 20 years old.
Yep.
South probably 18, a couple of years difference. Is there any way you can figure how much space of the roof you would have to have solar panels on for us to get hot water? You wouldn't have to replace the whole roof, I'm guessing. No. And I'm just wondering if, when you come back with prices, if you could figure approximately how much space you would have to replace on the roof to make it new and to put solar panels on it, just to give us an idea of what it would cost and what we would save by using solar hot water.
Yes, I could do that.
Also, you talked about some controls. We've been replacing one at a time.
Yes.
Whenever they go, and if we upgraded, the new technology would save us money in the long run. Might you give us an idea of what replacing all of them would cost as to one at a time or three at a time is costing, just so we know what we're
Benefit,
talking
yep.
about? Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Does anybody else? Mr. Kaufman?
So, Mrs. Oden, would you entertain a couple of motions for this committee's consideration to move the discussion along?
I believe so.
No, I'm prepared to make them. I'm asking you if it's okay if I do that, or if you had something else.
Move this to the board?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
So the first is move to recommend the board move forward with an investment grade audit. I think that's what you described.
Yep.
Your terminology is.
Right, yep.
Okay. So that's the first one, and
Okay.
I have another after we do the first.
Can you
So
repeat
yes,
that?
move to recommend the board move forward
Yes?
with an investment grade audit
For both high schools?
for both high schools. Thank you, Sean.
Do you want to put the name of the company in that motion?
I was going to say, my next motion had EEI in it, not the first. It is correct, right, EEI?
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
an investment grade audit for both high schools by EEI. We can add it at the end there.
For both high schools. Is that right? Let me read the motion to you, Mr. Kaufman, to make sure it's what you meant. Mr. Kaufman moved to recommend the board move forward with an investment grade audit for both high schools from EEI.
I think that's good. Is that the intent, Sean?
Point of order.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mosher?
Yes, Mr. Kaufman is not a member of the committee,
That's right.
so he cannot make a motion. He
Oh,
cannot
he is.
vote.
And
I am
I'm
a
sorry.
voting member of this
He is-
committee, Mr. Mosher.
He is a member of the committee.
Mr. Guarino is absent, and he's the alternate, not I.
Would you like to second the motion, Mr. Mosher?
No.
Okay, I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call. I don't have the, okay, Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
No.
And Mrs. Oden says yes. Motion passes 2-1.
Ms. Oda, have a second motion when you're ready.
1 minute, please. Okay. Okay, second one?
Yes. 1 second. I'm going to need help at some point with a correct term. So move to recommend EEI. Let me read it first, Mrs. Oden, and then I'll repeat it so you can take it down. Move to recommend EEI investigate and recommend to the board and to the city controller. I'm not exactly sure who it is over there. Investigate EEI, investigate and recommend to the board and city controller finance options for the project. And that concludes, you want me to read it again?
Please.
Move to recommend EEI, investigate and recommend
Yes.
to the board and city controller. I'll just say it this way, project financing options. Take out a word there. And again, I'll look to Mr. Donovan or Mr. Smith to see if this is the logical two things we've been asked to move forward tonight.
I don't know if we need to move forward with an official motion on the second one. At this point, I think we move forward. We can have discussions with the city CFO and treasurer without necessarily a motion.
Okay. So we didn't need that
Obviously, if-
formally, is what you're saying?
What's that?
We did not need this second one formally?
Yeah, I don't think we need the second one formally.
Okay, all right.
And then,
Well,
but
you
if
had
we-
it if you needed it. There you go.
Yes, okay.
Do you want?
So I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Okay. So the motion to move to recommend the board move forward with an investment grade audit for both high schools from the EEI has passed, and we'll move that on to the board at our next board meeting. Sean?
I didn't know if any of the board members wanted to consider, so on page 3 of the handout, we talked about solar on roofs. I didn't know at this point if you wanted to consider proceeding with that. I can tell you that Dr. Crisp has been kind of high on our list as the next school. I mean, the school was built like a bomb shelter. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the structural capacity of the roof. It used to have solar on the roof back when it was big pipes circulating water, to collect the sun's energy. We're going with very lightweight photoelectric devices at this point. So, I mean, that one's kind of a no-brainer. Fairgrounds Middle School might be a little more tricky just because the roof structure isn't as good. But even then, they might want to take a look at it there may be sections of the roof that could hold up to this sort of thing. But just it's kind of reminding you there's one more piece to it that you could consider tonight if you wish.
So you're looking for a motion for us to have them evaluate Dr. Crisp and give us a
I'd say Dr.
preliminary
Crisp and
price?
Fairgrounds. It's not binding us to anything at this point, right? You're just studying it.
Okay. So do we need a motion to investigate? Or, yeah, okay. Oh, you're not on the committee. Mr. Kaufman, do you want to make that motion?
I love solar energy. Don't get me wrong, my license plate when I came to New Hampshire was sun time.
Yep.
And I stay up to date on the technology and stuff.
Yep.
There's a thing called a solar sandwich by a company down in New Jersey, which is particularly cool. But I am reluctant about this. I understand investigate is not a decision to buy or whatever. And if I recall the contract we have, you guys essentially get paid out of long-term savings, or as projects come online that...
I'd simplify it to say we don't charge to investigate.
Okay. Let me ask one question because it'll really help decide what I would do. Are you penetrating the roof in many instances, or are you just kind of holding down collectors?
Holding down collectors, there's usually 2 penetrations for the conduit to come up.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, I would like to make a motion to ask EEI to investigate the implementation of solar panels on the roofs of Dr. Crisp and also, is this Fairgrounds Elementary?
Middle school.
At Dr. Crisp and at Fairgrounds Middle School. So, wait a minute, I'm sorry. If we're potentially rebuilding or renovating Fairgrounds, why would we invest in this now?
Good question. Outside our scope of things to look at, we're going to to recap, so I can think this through, we're looking at renovating or constructing a new school for Elm Street. As part of that, we would look at...
Oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. Elm Street, I got them confused.
But you're kind of a little bit on the right course, because we would also, as part of that process, look at the other 2 middle schools. But I don't think that, we're talking about adding to the schools potentially, not redoing roofs and that sort of thing. So, particular Fairgrounds Middle School, it's a brand new roof.
Question.
Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, we talk about the roofing and the idea of the solar panels. I'm interested in the combined weight of the solar panels and the ability of the roof to sustain the weight. Because I remember with the school, and we had looked at that because of the snow load, and we found out we had to replace a lot of steel in there. So I think we should look at the structure of the roof and its support and make sure that it's able to handle the extra loading of the solar panels.
Mr. Moses, Mr. Smith here, that's exactly what they would do. It's a feasibility study to determine whether or not we should proceed with putting solar on those 2 roofs. I'm pretty certain he'll come back at Dr. Crisp and say, yes, Fairgrounds is really the big question.
Yeah, because I'm interested in the construction of it to make sure that it's sturdy enough to support the added weight. And especially if we have a winter like we had last time when we had so much actual snow and water load on the roof. So that can be considerable.
Mr. Yeah,
I'm not sure I completed my motion, or, I mean, thankfully, Mr. Smith, you know, kind of, well, I never did finish the motion, but I'm glad that you clarified what you did. I kind of asked a question at the end of my motion there, so. So, Mrs. Oden, I did not write that one down. I mean, I have something,
I did.
oh, good. So
Okay.
maybe Ms.
You
Raymond
said-
can help us.
You said you moved to have EEI investigate solar at Dr. Crisp Elementary School and Fairgrounds Middle School.
Okay, so I could say that again, or,
I have it. Mr. Kaufman made the motion to ask EEI to investigate solar at Dr. Crisp School and Fairgrounds Middle School.
thank you.
Mr. Mosier, do you want to second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, time for a vote. Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden, yes. Passes unanimously. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zoden. There's a hand over here when you get a
Oh,
chance.
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith.
No, it's okay. I just, so we want them to come back for a future Board of Ed meeting. I think that's what I heard.
Right.
And so I know there's one Monday, that's probably too soon. So when we're looking, I'm just asking for their benefit. So we're
So-
looking at the end of the month potentially for that meeting, or?
Potentially. There's some discussion about whether we'll have the meeting at the end of the month because there's a question of administrative availability. And I would hate to have them come back and have no one from admin here to listen to it. So I think Monday is too soon. We're pretty tight. But certainly the first meeting in March. I have the date. Hold on one second.
I know you're also in budget season too, so that's,
Yeah, budget season 2. So the first meeting in March is March 11th at 7 PM here in this room. It's a Monday. And if that doesn't work, we have another one, March 25th.
Do we have a big one set up? Oh, okay.
Yeah, March 11th would work.
Okay. We'll let Dr. Mosley know.
Just one point of mentioning for that thought for the next meeting. If we were to want to do the work for this summer of 19, we would need to get approval from the board in that early March timeframe. It couldn't go any later than that, just as a, you could approve it for 2020, but you need about that much time to get a project of this magnitude ordered for 19. So we would need approval from the board at that time if they wanted to. And the financing questions would be whether we do, which I'm recommending, one high school at a time, one in 19 and one in 20, or one in 20 and one in 21. Or whether some different form of project ordering.
yeah, Mike, I think we need to set up that meeting with the city treasurer.
Figure that out.
And,
Yep.
and, you know, try to do that
Prior to that.
before this meeting.
Yep.
You know, on the 11th, so.
I have one last question.
Sure.
What's the cost of this initial investigation?
There's no cost.
No cost?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, did we lose Mr. Mosher?
Mr. Mosher, are you there? Is
Hello?
Do you want them dimmable or not?
Mr. Mosier, we lost you somehow.
Yeah, my battery went dead. I'm using an alternate phone now.
Okay, thank you.
I know the kids like them for the wrong reason.
Okay. And this is number what on the agenda, Mr. Donovan?
Well, we have 4 contracts. This is one of the 4 contracts, so it's item number 2 on the list.
Okay. Ms. Gingras is here to,
So hopefully this will be pretty quick. If you remember, in the fall, we purchased new, beautiful, gorgeous, and well-received scoreboards for Stello Stadium. One scoreboard is just your traditional soccer, football, lacrosse, field hockey scoreboard, shows the time, the score, etc. And then the other end is a video board, which was a lot of fun to play with in the fall, and we were able to project students' pictures on senior nights and things like that. So when we were investigating the cost of the new scoreboards, one of the things I kept asking about was protective coverings for them so that they wouldn't get dented. And we were repeatedly told that it wasn't necessary. When the installers came, that was the first question they asked. What are you putting over this to protect it from specifically lacrosse balls? Lacrosse balls are very small and hard, and when they're shot at the goals, they're shot very fast, so they'll dent things very easily. So we're looking to put same company that installed the scoreboards, so they're made specifically for the scoreboards. They basically add steel and then put a netting in front of them. It would not impede the view of the scoreboards. They would not impede the aesthetics of the scoreboard or anything like that. It would just honestly protect the boards from being dented. So I know you have the quote in front of you. It's a little over $12,000. That is for the nets and the installation. I think it is a necessary purchase to prevent the already investment that we've made. And my goal would be hopefully to have these installed before lacrosse starts at the end of March.
okay.
So that's why it's a little time sensitive. And the quote, if you notice, is dated back in November, but I did speak with the company today and the same cost is still acceptable.
Any questions? I just have one. I've seen them. Have we had any problems with those at all, with the new?
Hopefully you didn't jinx us, but nope.
Okay.
Nope. We actually even upgraded them a little bit from the initial installation. We had some wiring installed to bring it down to field level, because prior to that, you had to be up in the press box to run everything, whereas really the only sport that we use the press box to run everything is for football. Lacrosse, soccer, field hockey, we like to run the score panels and things right from ground level. So we had extra wires installed for very minimal cost to be able to do that.
Okay.
And that work has already been done.
Okay. Well, I think it's a wise investment for all the money we've invested in scoreboards.
Yes. Move to, I came over so you don't have to write it down. I'm going to hand you my slip of paper. It's a long one. Move to approve the installation of protective netting on the Stello scoreboards at a total cost of $12,145 to be paid for by the funds in the Stellos Stadium Trust Fund.
Second.
Okay.
Do we need to mention the name of the company? Do we need to add Scoreboard Enterprises as the name of the company that would do the work?
Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't.
By,
Yep.
we'll put it in by, what's the name?
Scoreboard Enterprises, Inc.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can keep that.
Okay. And seconded by Mr. Mosier. Okay, Mr. Kaufman?
Oh,
Roll call?
yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
And Mrs. Oden is yes. It passes unanimously.
Excellent, thank you.
Sorry you had to wait so long.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just going to basketball.
Okay.
Bring the ball, for example. Oh, that's nice.
If you want to hit off your head.
No, I don't. I got a concussion in high school from one of these things.
Do you have a dog? Do you have a dog?
Do I get to keep this? Because I love it.
Watch out for his teeth, though.
Did you see?
And which one would, no, that's okay, thanks. Which one would you like to do next, Mr.?
Why don't we do the re-roofing at the 3 elementary schools, the revised recommendation, and I'll have Mr. Smith speak to this.
Okay.
So in your package, you got the read ahead package, there's a memo dated January 30th, so I handed out a new one tonight dated February 5th, and subject line is a revised recommendation on it. So majority of the memo is still the same. We have roof leaks at 3 different schools. I would say they're nagging leaks, just recurring leaks. And as it turns out, the alderman, as you may recall, approved $380,000 of additional money for the school district to do this and several other projects. The specific amount set aside for the roofing project was $125,000. So we went out, the 3 schools are Lead Street above the kitchen and the boiler room, and those roofs are actually side by side. Bicentennial above the kitchen and boiler room, again, side by side. Amherst Street above the 1892 building. So the 1892 building is the original building. Mm-hmm. So as you're on Amherst Street looking at the school, it's the tall 3-story. Way back when, used to have slate roofs. Now it's shingled. So we got bids for all those locations from 3 different vendors. The ledge and Bicentennial, that's a rubberized roof, so it's like EPDM is the material what it's called, and then Amherst Street would be reshingling. We then received a 4th bid strictly for the Amherst Street roof from a company that just does shingles. They don't do rubber roofs, and they turned out to be the cheapest. So my recommendation is to break up this work into 3 parcels, and the very last paragraph summarizes that. Award to A&M Roofing, a total of $60,000 for work at Lead Street, with funds coming from, I call it the special account, and that's the accounting string for the $380,000 that we got from the alderman. Viking Roofing would get the second piece, which is at Bicentennial Elementary, and that comes to $46,286, also from that same account. Then the Olympic would get the work at Amherst Street. If we do the first 2 projects, then there's only $18,714 left of the $125. So the remainder that we need would come from deferred maintenance. I verified that we do have money there, sufficient money to do this. And in addition to that, I request $7,350 as a contingency for the above project. That $750 was basically 5% of 147. And I know, for example, I'm going to need some of that at Bicentennial because Viking Roofing's bid did not include replacing a couple of roof drains that cost about $1,200 each. Viking still is the lowest bidder, even if we do that. So that's my request.
Okay. Mr. Kaufman, are you interested in making this motion and just reading what's on here, and I'll just put it into the book, so it'll be
I
all
was
done?
thinking the exact same thing, but I do have a question for Mr. Smith. We could do it before or after the motion.
No, do it. You can
Okay.
ask a question.
So if I did my math right, you're still short $1,672 once you apply your contingency to the 13,000. I'm sorry.
So when I did the
Maybe
contingency,
maybe I
did
got
not,
something wrong here.
the contingency I did not make as part of the original 147 I was looking for. So if you added that in, then that'd be where the,
We'd have to find, you said that's available from deferred maintenance, but
Right.
do you have all you need there is really what I'm asking.
yeah, I'll just do a double check here. So 46, or 60,000 and 46,286 and 18,714 and 0, 0, 0. 5, 10, so if those three companies, you add up what I've recommended, that comes to $125,000. If I use the 18,714. So the difference between 18,714 and Olympic's bid of 31,750 is just under, yeah, it's about $13,000. So I think my numbers are correct.
Okay, thank you. I read it quickly. Okay, just wanted to be sure that you had everything you needed.
Right, and I can see where there'd be some confusion. So the total I'm looking for from deferred maintenance is about $20,000, a little bit over that, if you add in the contingency piece. You take the 13,036 plus the 7,350.
Okay, so that's 20,386.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what I would say is I will read the motion, I'll read the whole thing for the record, and then the last sentence, I'll just, not to exceed 21,000. Is that?
Deferred maintenance.
Okay. The good news, Mrs. Oden, is you don't have to write it down. Move to request approval to award A&M Roofing the amount of $60,000 for work at Ledge Street, with funds coming from a special account set up for this project. And the number is 91.5800.994-600-081200-000.
0. There's 4 zeros.
4 zeros, thank you, of $125,000 for the first project. Second project award to Viking Roofing in the amount of $46,286 for work at Bicentennial, also from that same special account. And the third item is awarded to Olympic Marketing Group in the amount of $31,750 for work at Amherst Street, with $18,714 from the special account. An additional $21,000, not to exceed $21,000, to be allocated from the deferred maintenance account to cover contingency and remaining balance.
You're cutting out the 13,036 number from deferred maintenance. In addition, I request authority to spend 7,350 as a contingency.
What I tried to do is add those two numbers together, the 13 and the 7, 13,036 plus the 7,350, and actually gave him almost another $800. I lumped it together into a contingency of 21,000.
For ease,
from the
could we just use what's on the paper? What
Well,
he
that was the
asked for?
conversation I had with Mr. Smith, if he had enough money. So we were,
I believe it's enough. If you follow what I had in the paper, I'm pretty sure I'll have enough money.
okay.
If not, you could come back and ask for more. Mhm.
Well, I don't want to read the whole thing over. So I'll
Okay.
start from number 3 again.
Okay.
Okay, so the third award to Olympic Marketing Group in the amount of $31,750 for work at Amherst Street, with $18,714 from the special account, and the remainder, $13,036 from our deferred maintenance account. And Also to include the authority to spend up to $7,350 as a contingency fee for the above project, funds from the deferred maintenance account.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay. Okay. Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden, yes. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Next one, Mr. Donovan.
Okay, the third contract that we have listed is one more for Mr. Smith. It's replacement of a train motor. I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you. So the chiller unit at this high school, North High School, failed this past summer, and we've scouted around. $80,000 was the fee to replace it. It's a train unit. We're pretty much, without replacing the entire chiller, which would be an awful lot of money, we're kind of stuck with proceeding with the same motor from the same company. This work was funded by that same resolution that the alderman passed, and they provided the $80,000. We actually scouted around to see if we could do it cheaper. When you're replacing a motor, one of the things you can do is rebuild the motor. And maybe Mr. Kaufman and I don't know about Mr. Donovan, when we were little kids, we used to have little motors, and we'd take them apart, because that's what little boys did. And there's wiring, around that motor, and we'd pull the wire out. It's just copper wire, and so that's what one of the things when they rebuild a motor is they rewind that copper wire. That's just one of the things they do. This is a very, 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 very large motor, so that doesn't make sense to do that here. So in that process of trying to doing it cheaper, we found a company that would rebuild a motor for us, including rewinding the thing, and it would be cheaper, but they're only giving a 1-year warranty on the final product, which to me we're spending a lot of money that didn't seem good enough. So we went back to Train and spoke to them at length about giving us a longer warranty. They finally said, okay, we'll give you a 5-year warranty, but it'll cost you, $3,000, give or take. So that's the final cost of this work would be $83,907. It includes a 5-year warranty. So I request approval for this project with funds coming up from that aldermanic special account. Same number as we alluded to in the last roofing project, and the remainder would come from our HVAC maintenance account, and I listed those accounting strings as well.
I have a question. What did you say they were going to charge you for a 1-year warranty?
It was so it was going to be, I believe I don't know if this was attached to yours. Had we just got the motor at their cost, so the roughly the $80,000, it'd only come with a 1-year warranty. So
okay.
we're adding the money to basically buy the 5-year warranty.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Mr. Mosier?
No, I know what it costs to rewind and rebuild a motor. I'm used to that. I used to wind these 500 horsepower motors, and that was quite a job. So, yeah, you're looking for a good warranty on it, because you get surges of voltage, and that can break something down. So, yeah, that's a good deal.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thanks. Before I make the motion, I do have a question. So Train doesn't seem to be very cooperative and helpful to us that something failed halfway through its life. Did they give us any consideration on a new part, or is that just what the fee would be to replace a motor from Train?
I would say we didn't get any special consideration, no. And we've been asking since last summer, why did this happen? Why did it fail halfway through its expected service life? And we basically, they don't know. They just said it's very rare for this to happen. That's as
Well,
good as I got back.
I'll say it. I hope when we build a new school that Train gives us a very competitive price.
We did remind them that we may be renovating and/or constructing a new school. That didn't seem to have an impact.
Okay, well, I'll come to the public hearing for that one. Mr. Donovan?
Mr.
has a
Donovan?
question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Mr. Smith, in the contract, it says the above repairs are based on the assumption that only the motor is damaged, and if not, there would be more costs. So are we pretty comfortable that only the motor is damaged, or might this be a higher cost item?
We're pretty comfortable. You may recall that we also this year paid roughly $60,000 for a midlife extension project on the unit itself. They haven't completed that work, but they've done most of it, and they would have and have told us of any sort of irregularities that they see in the process of doing that. There have been none that they've come up with. We'll knock on wood there.
Comment.
Mr. Mosier?
Yeah, in the past, I have dealt with Train exclusively for some of the equipment that we used in the rolling stock for the railroad, and I find that it is unusual for the equipment to break down. And we dealt with a lot of the motors and a lot of the equipment and the whole systems, and they have proved to be very, very good. But Train, like anybody else, because they are the ones who make the equipment and provide it, they do tend to be a little, shall we say, independent as far as some of these things. And they will probably take that motor that failed and tear it apart to find out why it failed, and then probably correct it or do something with it. I don't know, but I've been happy with it because I had the opportunity to attend the Train seminars and to teach a lot on the Train equipment. So take it for what it's worth.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
I appreciate Mr. Mosier's comment, how Train will take that part and understand what caused it to fail. And I hope the district can sell it to them for about discounted 5%, maybe around $80,000. See if you can recover the costs, because it's worth way more to them to know why that's failing than our replacement. Anyway, will you take a motion?
I have a question first. Do we have the same type in the Train in South?
We do. So both high schools have two chiller units, the large one and the small one, virtually identical between the two high schools. And this was the larger of the two units here. Of course, the school was built first. Hopefully this isn't a trend. But again, Train does build good stuff. That's part of the reason why we have gone with them. The air handlers and chiller units and that sort of stuff. They just have a very good reputation. They're no doubt protecting their bottom line
Okay,
quite a bit.
thank you. Mr. Kaufman, ready for a motion?
Yes, I'm just going to read the paragraph included. I think, Mr. Smith, in the future, you need to phrase these more like motions for us. Move to recommend approval. I'll just read it. It just really doesn't make for a good motion. Let me just try this, Ms. Zoden. Move to approve $80,000 from special account 91.580.9946000-081200-000 Zero, 4 zeros.
4 zeros.
What's a zero amongst friends? And $3,907 from the HVAC maintenance account numbered 91.1.22.2620 -054 243 -0000 for replacement train motors at the North High School.
Okay. Could you just repeat the beginning of that motion? Move to recommend $80,000 from special,
For the,
Account.
from the special account, and then I use the number of it. 91 dot,
okay. Okay, I'll reread the motion to make sure I have it right here. Move to recommend $80,000 from a special account 91.5800.9946000-08 1200-0000, $80,000, and 91.1.22.2620-054-243-000, $3,907 from the HVAC maintenance account for the replacement of the train motors at North High School.
the content's the same, but not the order in which I read it. I think the intent is fine.
Okay, thank
And you
you.
missed 1 0 on the second one, too. You
Oh,
only
you-
did 3 zeros.
Okay, well, we have it down
Sounds like the
here.
national desk.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Oden is yes. We have a unanimous vote. Okay. And the last
The last contract.
contract.
And I guess as we move forward here, for simplicity on motions, maybe we can leave the coding, the actual number out of it, and simply call it by, for example, this one, we would suggest funding from the Title I grant. I wouldn't then give you the 15 to 18 numbers. They will be in the motion on the piece of paper, but I think reading these numbers over and over that make no sense to anybody but me probably doesn't add any value, and it takes a lot of time, so. Okay, the last contract is a purchase from the Title I grant. As you know, this is over a $3 million grant that we get each year. It's for the 5 Title I elementary schools. The grant is put together by the Title I grant manager. It is then sent up to the state. The state approves line items and sometimes rejects line items, and they come back. The spending goes on throughout the year, and then typically there are changes made throughout the year. But due to the fact that this is a $30,000 amount, it's actually $30,292.50. I figured I'd bring it to the board since officially it says anything over $10,000. It doesn't say if it's for a grant, you don't have to bring it. So this is simply for the purchase of 150 Chromebooks at Amherst, at the Amherst Street School. On the last page of the handout given to you, it speaks to the activity. Each grant is required, every activity, they write a note here and they'll explain what the spending is for before it's approved. So this is, the pricing for this was, this is the same price we got for the other Chromebooks that we purchased earlier that Mr. Fahrenkoff went out and got from the same vendor, IT Insiders. So the request would be that we approve the purchase of 150 Chromebooks with 150 licenses for a total of $3,292.50.
I have a question. Usually, don't grants end at the end of the year?
Each grant has a year, but sometimes you can spend some of the money over a 2-year period.
Okay.
So you get a grant amount each year, but you get 2 years to spend. So obviously, if you were, for staff, that would be spent through the 1 year, and then you would add that same staff, assuming you wanted that same staff, into the next grant. But purchases of items and things like that, sometimes you can move it from 1 year to the next. But typically it is now, you get 2 years to spend all the money in a grant, though you will typically spend most of it in the first year.
So do you know if this money came from both years, or is this money accumulated from 1 year?
This was 71804. I believe this one is this year's. It was first approved 10/23/18. Yeah, so that's in this school year's. This is this school year's grant.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I know we have cut 8 Title I reading teachers over the last 4 years, I believe. And, you know, are we cutting teachers to buy technology? I guess that's one of my questions.
I don't think so, but I've never asked that question myself, so when you said we've cut that many reading teachers, I was not aware of that.
Title I reading teachers. Mhm.
Yeah. No, I'm not aware we cut that many Title I reading teachers. I'm not saying it's not correct, I'm not aware of that, though.
Well, this is difficult because I certainly understand the need for technology for our students. And it is a Title I school, it's Title I money. But, you know, I just wonder where we're putting our priorities. So.
Well, I could certainly check that out for you if you'd like. I can.
Okay. Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. How time sensitive is this particular item? Because it's one of those things that you could let us know about the question of the Title I teachers and then the reading teachers, and then get back for the next finance meeting, or before this motion is pushed forward, or is this something that needs to be done now? Because otherwise we would lose the
No,
pricing.
I don't think we're going to. No, I don't think.
Or because the students need it now, you know.
That would be the only reason, and I don't know the timeliness of when the students need it. It's, I'd have to check with the grant director on the timing.
Right.
I guess, well, unless you wanted to make a motion incumbent upon getting that information, or I could just get it and let you know.
Sometimes what we've done is approve a motion and get the update at the board meeting, and we can either table it if we need to revisit, or we could have it there to pass, so this way we can keep it moving. The other thing I would say is sometimes, as I understand it, with the Title I grants in particular, sometimes the Title I grants will only pay for 2 or 3 years of a teacher, at which point the district has to invest and pick up
Not
that
Title
person.
I.
No. Oh, I get my Perkins grant again, my confusion, sorry, okay. So perhaps we can have, is it Ms. Proul?
Yes.
Maybe come before this committee and speak to us about the Title I grant. Did you want to take a motion,
I was going to
Mrs.
say,
Oden?
yes, why don't you make the motion and we can get more information on it, but the motion will be there.
Okay. Move to approve,
The purchase. I have one. Do you want?
I've got one written, thought you were going to write it down.
Miss Raymond had written one here,
Oh,
so
okay.
So
if-
move to approve the purchase of 150 Chromebooks and Google licenses from Computer Hut of
I don't know, it just says any.
NH, New Hampshire.
New Hampshire for a total of $30,292.50 to be paid from the Title I grant.
The only thing I would add would be that it's intended for the Amherst Street Elementary School.
Yep. Thank you.
Now, I do have one question, if I may, Mrs. Oden. So, Mr. Donovan, do we know what the impact is for maintenance and upgrades? Does this equipment just kind of stay the way it is for its life? Or are we on the hook for maintenance and update costs after the purchase of this equipment?
No, they're Chromebooks, so we'll keep them until, just like we would a computer, we keep it until it's
Dead?
dead.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the motion by Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Mosher, do you have a second?
Second?
For the vote, Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden, yes. Okay, passed unanimously. The next one, is that the photocopying?
Yes, as you're probably aware, we, back about, I think, 7 or 8 years now, started working with a company called SPC to get our copy machines up to date. When I got here, we had 3 or 4 different vendors. We had a lot of old machines that weren't working, required continuous upgrades. So we're on the second contract with SPC. We pay for these through a lease. But basically, they provide, once a year, they come down. There's a book. It's about that thick, and I didn't think I would copy it and put it in everyone's packages. There's only so much excitement that copies can bring forward. But I to try to summarize what's been happening with the copiers. So if you take a look at the first sheet behind the cover, it shows our annual, this is the black and white, or just call it the black volume. You can see over the last 4 years what we've done. We had a 1% increase in the 17-18 school year versus the 16-17 school year, which equates to about 354,000 copies. So the total amount of black and white copies that we had was 27,811,000. So schools copy a lot. If someone wants to come up with an idea to go paperless in schools, it would be a wonderful place to try. But just the way we work now in a school district, we do have significant amount of copies. So we have had slight decrease, though. We'll see if we can continue that. The second slide basically shows you over the past 4 years by school. So you can see there's obviously the larger schools have a lot more copies than the smaller schools. You can see where there's been a few schools where there's been decreases in the amount of black copies, then there's also ones where there've been increases. I don't really look at it except for partway through a year each year as far as what's going on with each school in the black and white, because we have been trending down slightly, so. Okay, and then the next couple pages, you can see each of the individual schools, what their volume was for the year, and then also sort of when you divide the number of copies by the student population so that you come up with an annual copy per student. The elementary schools, they have a low of, at Fairgrounds Elementary, of 1,738.
Hello?
Mr. Mosher, we can hear you.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? Mr. Mosher? Mr. Mosher, can you hear us?
Wonder if his phone died like the other one. It hasn't gone dead, though.
Usually you can hear it go off. Mr. Mosher? We'll just go on.
Okay, so the low of 1,738 at Fairgrounds and a high of 3,160 at MD. So I would look and start to question sort of why is MD so much higher. Most of them are all in the 2,500 to 2,875 range. So that's sort of where I'd expect them to fall. Okay, that's the black and white. The next is the annual color volume. Now, the cost of a color copy is about 10 times more than the cost of a black copy. And you can see we had a 9% increase in the color copies. So every copy machine is not capable of printing color. In all the elementary and middle schools, the only machine that can print color is in the office, because we didn't want it out there where people can just kind of go crazy with color. The default on everyone's computer is to print to black and white, so you've got to call it up and specifically ask for color, like I had to do this. But there was a 9% increase. We're looking into that more. The one piece of information we got back with a lot of the so-called electronic textbooks now, we are now copying things on the copy machine where it used to be in a textbook. So we're downloading a file, copying it. If that file happens to have color in it and they print it on the color, then it's going to count as a color copy. So I think that's something I need to look at to see the schools where they increase significantly. For example, you know, like Bicentennial was up 37%. Is that the reason? So we're looking into that now. I don't have those answers, but I will have some more answers hopefully next time.
Something's happened now that their phone has quit.
There he is.
Mr. Mosher, can you hear us? He must have his phone on mute, maybe?
I'm guessing. But why would we hear him? We shouldn't hear him if he did.
I have a question. When we're looking at black and white, I believe it was 2017-18 where we sent the math program out to be copied for teachers so that they weren't running it off. I'm surprised every school didn't go down some, because that was substantial. That was I think a $35,000 investment we made.
100,000, Mrs. Oden.
Was it 100 to copy that?
The Eureka curriculum I think is what you're talking. I think it was $100,000 in external printing costs.
But did we do the copying in-house, or did we send it out? If we sent it out, it won't be on here. This is just...
Sent it out.
Okay, well, this is only our copy machines.
But what I'm saying is, I'm surprised the number of copies they made didn't go down because they didn't have to make the math copies.
Yeah, but that's what. The math copies were in black and white. The Eureka Math workbooks are in black and white.
But we're looking at the cost of black and white copies.
Right now,
the
this is
first part.
color.
Pardon?
Oh, in the first part, yes.
And a lot of them, the number of copies are going up. And I would have thought, seeing where we sent the math program out, and math has a lot of the copies to make, I would have thought that the copying would have gone down.
Right.
And several schools, it's gone up.
Well, I
One
guess
school-
what that tells you is that the math wasn't that much of the copy, because, right?
They found another way to print. I think it's a great observation, Mrs. Oden, but I think you're correct. We would have expected it to go down, having printed those books externally, so we wouldn't be doing on the copy machines. It sounds like they found something else to print. Now, Mr. Donovan, you know this is one of my subjects that I had an interest in. Can we, have people, maybe by department, to get an idea about what departments are using it? We don't have to go down to the individual classroom, but we can certainly know if it's a math department or a social studies department that's driving maybe the higher use of color. Black and white I'm less concerned about because it's fractions of a cent for a copy, and the fact that you've kept it around that 26 mil, I'm impressed that it's not 30. I'll be honest with you.
I don't think I've done much about
Well,
it.
no, I think by giving voice to it and making it known, I think people are respecting it. But the color is, that's avoidable expense, in
Yes.
my opinion. And I know we see it sometimes in our board documents, the newsletters that go out from some of these elementary schools. They can print them on the colored paper to give the illusion of color, but they don't need to use colored paper and colored printing. And the way the machines work is even if you print a page black and white on a color machine, you get charged for color. It doesn't make a distinction, this was a black and white page or this is a color page.
Well, no, the copiers that have the capability to print color also print black and white. You decide when you make the print whether it's going to have color or not.
Exactly, but even if, for example, the document you have here, there's some red on whatever page that is, 32 in the handout.
Yes.
And then the next page, 33, is black and white. This entire packet will be billed as color, even though it's a mix of color on one page and black and white on the other. This whole thing will be billed as color on the color machine.
No, this is only, this one with the red, these are just the color copies. The black and white copies are, so we had the 28 million black and white copies, and then we had the color copies, we had what, how many? Like a million.
My background is working at a Kinko's, and I know how we would charge them, even if if it came off the color machine, we would charge a color price. So you might want to check with the vendor, because it's the
I'm pretty sure
toner
of that.
in the color machine that's being used, if it's a black and white or a magenta, it's that toner that they're spending.
Yeah, but
So-
that's not the case. I'm
Okay,
sure
you're
it
sure
is.
about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only the colors. Because the
Then
machine
that's
right
even
now-
worse. Then they're really using it heavy.
Yeah,
If these
I mean-
black and whites aren't counted in that color amount. I think you might want to look at finding out, because the machines have the capability of, by department, you can monitor usage,
Right.
and it might be worthwhile if you're going to see these kinds of spikes.
Right.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I just wanted to throw in there that, because you made the color copies, like on page 33, which is black and white, you can see the pixelation in the corners of various, there's like yellow in there. So, not that it matters, but it doesn't differentiate between, it doesn't only use black ink on these black and white pages. Doesn't matter. at the end.
Well, yeah, it's 5 cents a copy versus a fraction of a penny
I
to us.
wonder, right, I wonder if we could consider moving forward, having an agreement or whatever that the board doesn't necessarily need colors. Like,
I've tried that in the past, so
okay,
please bring it forward again.
I'll drop it.
No, please don't. No, I'm in favor
I
of
like
it.
it. It's pretty, but I don't want to be responsible for costing extra money.
No, I don't think it, I mean, it's not really, I mean, the copies for the board would be coming from the central office, the district office. So they didn't really go up that much. But yes, anything, if you request, like for example, these graphs, if you put them in black and white, they're kind of hard to read.
Yeah.
So I purposely don't print in color very frequently, but I did just for this one presentation. Okay, and then just to finish up, there's a summary page in there that talks about the number of units we have through SPC. Now keep in mind, this covers all our copiers, and it covers what we call our high-speed printers. It doesn't, this number doesn't cover if somebody, a teacher has an HP in their office or something like that. I've tried to limit those, but it's amazing how everybody in the world wants to have their own printer in their own classroom. And that's a very expensive way to print. That's how you print at home. That's very expensive. And then basically I just sort of put together, there's a spreadsheet here comparing by school, the 16 to 17 to 17 to 18, the difference numbers by schools, so you can see which schools went up, which went down for both the color and the black and white. So there's probably more data here about copies than you want to look at. As part of the SPC agreement, we get each month a sort of an electronic spreadsheet, I'll call it, which shows you which schools are sort of running over where they were last year. And like I said, we're in the process of reviewing that now and saying, okay, if one school, we're about halfway through the school year, if one school's way ahead on the color copies, then we're going to reach out to them and say, hey, what's going on? Because I guess you want to try to keep this controlled somewhat. This cost is pretty much managed at the administrative level. The administrative office pays for this. The other option that I had brought up previously was I could turn around and say, okay, I'm going to give you so much money and you spend it on copies. But until that to me, to be fair, it would be more of a project because I'd have to find out, okay, what did you really spend on? Were you copying things for the PTO? Were you copying, do you have certain books where you teach? So I've kind of stayed away from that, but the only concern, like I said, I have here is that 9% increase in the color. Really need to keep that down.
I do have one question.
Kaufman.
Mr. Donovan, in the past when we've spoken about it, you were able to tell us what the mix was of equipment. Some of it's new, some of it's refurbished, some of it's, you had a mix of equipment in terms of its
Yeah, we still do.
life, whatever.
Though each year, at the end of each year, and each school year, we go through, we've replaced, on this deal, which is a 6-year deal, we're halfway through it, we've replaced about 10 or 12 of the machines at no cost because they were used machines that were brought in and they just weren't functioning properly. So we replaced them with other used machines, but less used machines, should I say. So we do look at that each and every summer. And if there's been a machine that's been acting up during the year, we'll take a look at that with the vendor and hopefully find some sort of improvement.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Mr. Mosher, are you there?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, we lost you for a while. We thought it had disconnected.
Yeah, something happened that, because my phone was working all right.
Okay.
I checked that, and it seemed like whatever happened was on your end.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. Next one.
Quarterly credit card report. This is a policy that requests that we go over our credit card usage each quarter. So what I did this time was compare the spend in 2017 calendar year to the spend in 2018 calendar year. In 2017, the total was $17,500, so you can see we don't use credit cards very much. It did jump up to $25,000 in 2018. The increase there is mostly all just one line item, advertising. We've gone to more online advertising with Indeed and School Spring. Those two require payment with a credit card as opposed to a purchase order or a check. So other than that, comparing the 2 years, it's pretty much the same. Most of the spending on credit cards, now it's advertising, but it's also been typically travel and conferences and seminars where you need a credit card. And then there's just a few other items. The only other times we use them is if it's proof that we can save a reasonable amount of money charging a credit card as opposed to sending them a check.
Any questions? Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at the conferences line, nearly doubled, right? More than doubled. So in 17, the conferences line was just under $4,100. And in the 18, it's almost $11,000. So you went from 4,100 to 11,000.
Yes, but if you look at the travel piece was 7,000 last year, and it was only 667 this year. So I typically put those two together. Sometimes it gets charged to the conference because the travel's part of it. Sometimes it doesn't. But if we suggest people use their own credit cards. Keep in mind, this isn't the total spend on these line items. These are just the amount spent using the company credit card.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. December financial report.
Okay, we'll run through this quickly. Keep in mind, this is December, since we didn't have a meeting in January. And then next month, when we have a meeting, the second Tuesday in March, we'll go through the January and February's together. So basically, we're 6/12 through the year if you do it on a calendar year, or we're 4/10 through the year on a school year. If you go to the last page, you'll see we're on a spend of 41.73. And I always tell people, if you take those two ratios, which are 40 and 50%, for most of the year, the number should be down lower, close, just above that 40%, but anything above a 50%, you'd probably be a little bit concerned. But it's basically 42%, so we're okay there. Took a look at all the labor accounts. Nothing out of the ordinary. The wages temporary seasonal line, that's higher than it's usually been. We have 4 temps working as custodians now for staff that are out. So those costs are budgeted in the wages full-time, but when those people aren't getting paid and the temps come in, then the charge gets done to another line. So that's what that 13,000 is.
Can that be moved at the end of the year?
It's a lot of work because you got to move it person by person. Okay, and then other than that, the stipends line is 102,000, which is higher, but that's what's usually in that line. Head teacher get their stipends paid per paycheck, and then there's the fall coaches at the high school. So both the fall coaches at the high school, that's why it's higher than it's been running in the last few months. Okay, then sort of sliding down to the property services. I always look at the electricity, heating, gas, and water, so to take a look at where we were at the same time last year. Water and heating gas were pretty much within a few $1,000s of where we were last year. The electricity this year, most of the year has been running higher. It's 120,000 higher than we were at the same time last year. So it's, like I said, it started running higher this year. It really hasn't dropped. We're still not in last year the total electricity was about 1.9 million. We have a budget of 2 million. So even if it runs the 100,000 higher, the budget should cover it. So I'm not concerned, except I probably will use all that. Right now, it looks like the total amount of the budget will be used. Heating gas, the key will be over the next couple of months. At this point, we have some extra in that, but it is February, right? Early February.
60 degrees today.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about electricity?
Certainly.
Is that because our usage is up or because of Eversource raising their rates, or both?
We have rates where we purchase the rate in advance. We have a 3-year deal. Okay. So no, the rate did not go up. It's usage.
Okay.
Probably all the kids charging their phones during the day.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll get more data on that as it goes on, but looking at an individual electric invoice doesn't tell you a whole lot, especially we have so many of them. Okay, also the sort of HVAC maintenance, it's 33,000 this month, which is high, but that's paying for a couple of the contracts that we have with, who is it? Control Technologies, who happen to be the firms that was sitting here today. Okay, the rentals, this month, there's a Boys and Girls Club contract that we have for about $3,000, and then there's the Brentwood. That's basically what that is. Moving down to the other services, nothing's too much out of line. The conference and seminars number, it's only $6,374, but that's higher than typical. So I had someone go through and take a look. There were just a lot of seminars where people went. Nothing significant as far as costs, just a lot of different people went to seminars, and they happen to hit in this one month. Most of those costs come out of the school's budgets anyway, so I'm not too concerned that they're going to overrun that line.
Question, Mr. Donovan, on the telephone?
Yes.
Kind of channeling Mr. Farrington here for a second. Are we ever going to, is the switch over to the IP telephony with the whole city and the way they did it, will we ever realize any savings from that?
I would like to say yes, but I have yet to see it.
Okay, I had to do that.
Yeah.
I haven't been here in over a year, and I just felt as though I had to ask. That's kind of like a running joke on the committee going back a few years. That's all.
Okay, and then go down, you'll see the transportation services numbers in the month were very low because the invoices didn't get input until January. So when you see January, you'll see 2 months, and so it's just a catch-up. Tuition out of district, the one I speak about all the time, $609,000 this month. So we still have 2.35 remaining, but we have 6 more months of costs coming, and we're typically a month behind because we pay after the month ends. So that is going to overrun, and when I get to my forecast in sort of the April time period going forward, I'll have a estimate of how much, but my guess is it's at least that 800,000 number I put in the budget. Okay, supplies and materials, no concerns there, everything looks fine. And then the equipment, their miscellaneous equipment, 25,000, pretty high number, but if you recall, a couple months ago, Mr. Smith put in a request for some new burnishers at the North and South High Schools, and that was the purchase of those. I think there were 3 of them. So that's that cost. Like I said, this is just through December. The other thing, if you look at the other month-by-month one, if you're looking for trends and things, I also then look, at the percent used And obviously, if there's any numbers where there's a significant amount used percentage-wise, so for example, if you look on the first page of the month by month, you'll see retirement and separation pay. It's like 98% used, but the retirement payments have all been made. So that's why the number's higher. Now, if people leave between now and June and they had accrued vacation time, it will get charged there. So that line will probably overrun its budget. But it shouldn't be by significant sums, unless a few people that have been here for a long time suddenly leave before the school year ends. So just to, let you know, I do go through that and look for anything that's a little out of the ordinary. And some people say, well, can you spend more than you have on that one line? Yes, you can. You can spend more than you have on that line, but you can't spend more than you have in that category. Okay? So, for example, the property services, 54. You'll see a couple of those where it's over 100%, but those people have money in one of those other lines in that group. So that, by doing it that way, it saves us lots of time. We're not moving money all the time back and forth. So that is the financial report.
Mr. Kaufman?
Move to accept and place on file the December 2018 financial report.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden? Yes. Passed unanimously. Okay. Next item.
Okay, next is the transfer report. The good thing, there's only one transfer this time that meets its the level, and this is the adult ed moving money from their transportation line to their advertising line. And they do, you've probably seen them twice a year. They send out their pamphlets and things, letting everyone know the course is available for that semester. And I don't think you have to approve that because it's not over 5,000.
Okay. Okay. So we don't need to prove that, that's FYI.
Yep.
Okay, and the public school grant signatures.
Okay, there was, Mr. Kaufman sent an email through Mrs. Oden to me regarding the infrastructure grant signatures that Ms. Kinsella asked for. So just basically sort of put this together. The board has, we explained the fund. We had the board approve $399,000 of grants, which they've done. And then we said, okay, to get paid, we need to, every board member has to sign. So what we were requesting, the board has already approved, and this is just simply a way to get paid, so we're reaching out. We've had, I believe there were 7 that were approved and signed off the first time. Then there were 6 done. There are 4 now that we're just waiting for a couple of board members to sign so we can get that up to the state and get paid. And then there are 3 more. And those 3 more, we're getting extensions on 2 of the 3. So those will be probably either in April or later in the summer. So this pretty much just explains the process, and like I said, so those 4 can be signed, and the last 3, the board has approved them. It's just a matter of getting them complete so that we can request funds from the state.
I guess my question,
Did you
I'm
have
sorry.
a question on that, Mr. Kaufman? Okay.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, I understand the board approved the funding to spend the money, but I was under the impression that we would still have to approve any, in other words, the individual board members cannot just sign. There was no action by the board approving the submission of the reimbursement request. And I just wanted to make sure we were doing the proper thing. I understand we approved to spend the money, but individual board members cannot sign something because they can't represent themselves. In other words, there's no action by the board as a whole to vote acceptance and reimbursement. And that's just my concern. I think we need to have a motion that just moves forward, to either to recommend that we submit the reimbursement paperwork for those 4 particular schools that are. See, I thought they were all 7. I didn't realize that 4 in and 3 out or whatever.
Well, I mean, I sort of disagree with you. You approved the expense. When you approve an expense, I don't then bring you the invoice and have you approve the invoice. You approve the expense, we spend the money that you approved, and then the process goes on. All we're asking you to sign as board members is the request for reimbursement. So you've already approved the expense. Now, to get reimbursed, the state said, oh, you need every board member to sign saying, yes, we approve this expense, but you already approved the expense.
No, we're approving the reimbursement. We're not approving the expense, as I understood that paperwork.
Excuse me.
That's true, but what other reimbursement do you ever approve?
I don't know. It hasn't come to me before. I don't recall seeing it.
Okay, I would like to read the motion. It was made at the March 26th Board of Ed meeting. Mr. Greeno moved, seconded by Ms. Hohensee, to approve receipt of the Public School Infrastructure Fund grants in the total amount of $399,034.79, with the stipulation that some of the grants remain pending at the state level. So voted unanimously by roll call. So I think that's covered it. I don't have a problem with what we've done at all. Ms. Raymond?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, the motion that was approved unanimously was to approve receiving the grants, and they require our signature to receive them, correct? So they can't disperse the grants that we voted that we were going to receive unless all 9 members sign?
Yes.
Okay, so I feel like this unanimous motion requires us to sign unless we have another motion changing our idea. So,
Yeah,
and I
well,
don't think we should do
You approve
that.
the expense, and then the state, this is odd because the state, typically when the state gives you a grant, they don't ask then for every single board member to sign something. It's very clunky, as you can imagine. Every time we finish one of these relatively small grants, we have to get 9 people to sign it. I mean, there's no other process that we have in place in the city that every time something gets approved, we have to get 9 people to sign it to say, oh, will you please pay us? But, I mean, that's how they set it up, so that's the process we follow.
Mr. Mosher, do you have commentary?
Yeah, I agree with you that, we approved it, and then we're just looking to get the money back, that's all.
Thank you.
Mrs. Oden, I'm sorry, but if I may, I just struggle with the notion that individual board members are signing something without approval from the board to do it, and that's where I'm stuck. Okay, I certainly want to receive reimbursement for the funds we paid. I just am stuck over the fact that I see it personally, and my understanding of what's happening is that individual board members are signing for something. There's no vote that the board took that it authorized board members to sign something, in my opinion, and that's why I'm struggling. I mean, my problem goes away if we just move to, recommend approval of the reimbursement form, and then we vote on it, and that makes me whole. But the way I see it now, I'm just still struggling despite what you've offered as an explanation.
What part? Sure.
So I would just suggest that you read again the motion, because the motion says that we moved to approve the receipt of the Public School Infrastructure Fund grants in the total amount. And then it goes on to say how much, $399,000. So we moved to approve the receipt of that money. So we didn't approve spending money at that time. We moved to receive the grant money. So if, in order to receive the grant money, a signature is being required by the state, I would say that the way that that motion was worded now is binding for members to sign to make that happen, or else they're not following the motion that we signed.
To receive the money, happy to sign for it. But to request reimbursement, I see that as a separate act of the board requiring a vote, because individual board members cannot sign on behalf of the board without approval by the board.
Right.
And I believe that's what's happening.
With all due respect, receiving reimbursement versus receiving money, you're still receiving the money. It's semantics, but it doesn't change the actual action that was approved. And we could certainly ask one of our attorneys to take a look at it.
That would be helpful to me, because right now, I'm stuck on people signing for the board without board action authorizing them to do it.
But
That's where I'm at, because
Okay.
that's what's happened. The secretary asked us to sign a document, took no board action, no discussion, no vote, and I think there's a problem with that. That's where I'm
We
stuck.
already had the vote. I don't understand
I
it.
don't see a vote to request reimbursement. Correctly, you have a vote to receive money, but not...
Receipt of funds, reimbursement.
I see this as a receipt of money to spend, not reimburse.
So I'm going to say two things here to this, and I'll probably regret it. But one, I'm happy to ask Mr. Clausen if Ms. Oden would like me to do that. I speak to him frequently these days. But two, we as a board voted on this in March of 2018. And then in October of 2018, we met again at a board meeting, and that was when we did our first signatures. And we did 7. We signed 7 of them on that date. And then we met again on November 13th, 2018, and we signed another 6. And all of us, all 9 of us, were aware on both of those dates when we signed those 13 grant things that we had agreed on March 26th by unanimous, voting, that we were all going to do that. And then all of a sudden now, on 1/28, there's a problem. To me,
That's the point, there was a vote.
Excuse me, could you
No,
please?
there was-
Excuse me, Mr. Kaufman, she has the floor. Please, ask for the floor if you're going to speak.
there was no vote retaken in October, and there was no vote retaken in November, because the vote we made in March was still binding. So, and I don't see any change from that, because all of these ones that are still in the queue still fall under that original motion. So to me, I just worry about the appearance that we are valuing certain schools over others, because we now have 6, 7, 8 left, and this is putting into question whether those schools are going to get the same security upgrades that the others have if
You've already
we
received
continue
the
to not
funds.
sign it.
I don't understand how
Excuse
that's
me,
possible.
I'm sorry, point of order.
Because-
She has the floor, please.
Because some of the projects are still pending, right? We've gotten extensions, so 3. So at this point, we have 3 schools that could potentially not get their security upgrades if we don't resolve this and get those signatures, which is really upsetting to me, so.
May
I would
speak?
like to say, if you could run that by attorney, either Bolton or Clausen. But as I see this, when we voted on March 26th, and it had been discussed at the Finance and Operations meeting on March 20th, we voted on it at the board meeting at March 26th. And I don't think, I'm not a lawyer, but I would, as a board member, think that that was certainly enough information, and I thought the word receipt of the public school infrastructure grant funds, if there were people that did not vote for that, that might be different, but it was unanimously voted, and I think we anticipated getting reimbursed by the state. Mr. Kaufman?
Well, thank you for bringing it up tonight. Would you please speak with Mr. Clausen? My concern, I'm happy to sign once I understand and feel comfortable that there's a board vote to request the reimbursement. I must have missed it the last time. Had I had the understanding I have now, I would not have signed previously. That's all I can tell you. So I'm not trying to, I certainly want the upgrades to occur. And if I understand what happened, we've already received the money to go get those things done.
No, we haven't. And if you don't sign the form, we will not get the money from the state. If one person on this board who voted to get the money decides I'm not signing it because we didn't vote to sign it, then we won't get the money. We've already we've paid for the money ourselves. We're asking for it back from the state. And if you all don't sign it, if one or two people don't sign it, I guess we don't get the money. We just...
And could I just add, I believe it's 80% of the cost is what the state is going to reimburse us. And that was when we voted for this on March 26th, that's what we were voting for, to get reimbursed from the state for 80% of the cost of these security upgrades. Mr. Mosher, do you have anything to add?
No, I've been following it, and I agree with you. And in 12 years, I have never heard anything so strange as what Mr. Kaufman has been putting forward. And it'd be interesting to see what the attorneys have to say about it. But I agree with you, because this is very strange.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
Move to adjourn.
Okay. I'm looking for second. Okay. And vote, Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden, yes. It's unanimous. It is 8:20.